Hi, how you doing? Justin here. Today I'm going to be giving you an introduction into the techniques that you need if you want to start playing slide guitar. Now, before we get into the technical stuff, one question that always comes up when I meet somebody who wants to play slide guitar is, which slide should I buy? So there is a whole range of different materials and different sizes and different shapes, and it's a really personal thing. I must have bought hundreds over the years that I've kind of played about with. The basic main types you get a glass slide, sometimes made from a bottle, the neck of a bottle, and I don't particularly get on with the glass ones. I find them a little bit light, although they've got a pretty distinct sound on an acoustic guitar. And by light I mean kind of not thin. It's difficult to describe the different tonal textures. You'd have to check them out for yourself. But glass slide, definitely a lot of people like them. The other type that's really common is kind of your regular steel kind of slide, which is not a bad kind of choice for a beginner. I find them quite light, physically light, and therefore I don't feel like I get as good a connection with the string. So the one that I've settled on just in the last couple of years, I bought from bottleneckguitar.com, and it's slightly kind of shorter than regular, and it's really heavy. It's made of brass, and I really like this slide. You can get different sizes as well. I quite like this little mini one, which slides right on the finger so that you can actually play kind of a lot of regular guitar and still have access to the slide thing. One thing that you want to be careful of is not to get one that goes right over that knuckle, okay, like this one does. I thought I was going to get stuck then. Would have been kind of scary. You want it really to stop on that knuckle there, so that's kind of more than enough for me to get all of the 6 strings. This glass one's a little bit too big and it doesn't fit on my finger well. It kind of, you know, I don't feel like I've got very good control with it. So, but like I said, it's really personal. It depends on your finger size and what sort of feeling you want from your slide. So my advice would be to go and get one, have a bit of a muck around and see how you get on with it. And then if you feel like it might be better to try another one, go and buy another one and see. Or borrow your friends or whatever, you don't always have to buy them. So you've gone and bought yourself a slide at the local store. Next thing you need to know is how you're going to put it on the neck. So what's really important to understand is that the slide is replacing the frets. So with the slide you don't press down on the strings. So if I just turn there's my sound. I've got a little bit of delay and a bit of distortion. I'll just turn those off for a second. So if I put the slide on the neck and press down, you can hear the pitch change all of a sudden, like, because it's still pressing down on the frets. Whereas what you want with the slide is a light enough pressure that you don't hear that jump. Okay, so you shouldn't hear ever any like kind of jumps in pitch. It should always be really smooth. And the first thing that I would recommend that you do is practice just letting it sit on the strings without pressing down too hard, because it's quite a light touch, which is why I think I like the heavy slide, because it feels like I don't have to press it on the strings, I just rest it there and the weight of itself seems to hold the right balance on the strings. So that would be one of the things that you want to get used to doing first of all, is just that feeling of how it sits on the strings and that you're not getting this, which sounds pretty horrible. The other thing that you want to watch out for when you're first starting to put the slide on the guitar is that it wants to remain exactly parallel to the frets. Okay, so there are some kind of advanced techniques where you might angle the slide, but I really recommend to start off with you practice working so the slide is always exactly parallel to the fret. And also worth noting when you're putting the slide actually onto the neck is that whereas where you put your finger on the guitar neck would normally be just behind the fret, where you want to put the slide is exactly on the fret, because it's replacing the fret. So if I'm playing this note here, this note D at the 7th fret of the 3rd string, now I'm looking down, the middle of the slide is exactly above the fret. Really good exercise just to play a note and then, or even without vibrato, I was putting vibrato on there, but see if you can get it really nicely in tune without having any vibrato, because vibrato can kind of cover up your intonation a bit. Intonation is your in-tuneness, in case you're not familiar with that term. So they're really, really important things. Nice light touch, not pressing too hard, keeping the slide parallel to the frets, and when you're playing a note, you position the slide right on top of the fret. Okay, that's this hand. Now, actually, probably the biggest deal with slide guitar is muting with what would normally be your picking hand. Okay, so you're kind of playing slide guitar fingerstyle. It's kind of possible to use a pick, but it's really, really difficult. So if you're starting out on slide guitar, I definitely recommend that you're doing it with fingerstyle, because the thing with slide is that all of the notes can ring out under the slide. So if you're not doing any muting, so if I'm not doing any muting with this hand and I try and play some licks, I'm sure some of you have had your guitar sounding like that if you're starting off with slide. And the deal is all in this hand doing the muting. So what I'll be doing, in fact, let's go to a close-up. I'll show you this in a close-up, I think. The most common way of controlling the notes when you're playing slide is to do it fingerstyle and to have all of the strings muted except the notes that you want to play. So let's say, for example, we wanted to play the note G on the 12th fret of the 3rd string. This note here, okay? Now, if I don't have any fingers on, you can hear there's other notes kind of already starting to ring out, even though I've not plucked anything yet, they're just starting to catch, okay? It's really important that all of that's muted. So what we're going to do, we play the note with our first finger, so 1, 2, 3rd string, okay? The fingers 2 and 3 would sit on the thinnest 2 strings, and they're just resting on it to mute it. And thumb would sit on the 4th string, just like I'm about to play it, and then lay flat over so that all of the other strings are muted. So now, just by playing with my first finger, all of the other notes are muted, and there's only that one string that's going to ring out. Okay, if I wanted to get another string, usually what I do is I move my whole hand over. So I go. If I'm playing a note on the 2nd string, I'm still using my first finger. Thumb is now resting on all of the strings. My 3rd finger's become redundant. Okay, so you can see the way that would move over even onto the thinner string. Now, thumb would be muting all of the strings. Okay, it doesn't have to be like that, and sometimes you might use, say, 2 fingers together. So you might end up doing some other stuff, but really that's a big deal, and a great thing to practice is just to play a little bit of a scale. And get used to actually being able to play just that one note at a time. One thing to note as well with the slide guitar being a replacement of the fret is that you actually get notes on either side of the slide. So if I'm playing a note here, which is the 8th fret of or 9th fret of the 2nd string, there's actually a note behind as well. And that note will ring out quite a bit. It's less noticeable on electric guitar because you've got pickups here, but on an acoustic guitar, you really hear quite a lot of these notes behind. You can hear those notes ringing out quite a lot. So what most slide guitar players tend to do is to leave the 1st and 2nd fingers just touching behind the slide, and what that does is mute any of those notes that might be creeping out behind the slide, okay, particularly for acoustic guitar. Electric guitar, it's still, I think, a good habit to get into, but there are occasions where you deliberately don't. So Little Red Rooster by the Rolling Stones, or the Stones version, when he's doing the big slide up to the 12th fret, he's definitely leaving all of the fingers off and just the slide, so you deliberately get those 2 different notes. It adds a real kind of interesting chorus effect to the sound. So sometimes you don't want to mute behind, but for most of the time you probably will. Now, the other thing that's really commonly asked is about open tunings. Now, all of the stuff I've been doing so far has been in regular tuning, just standard tuning, because I think sometimes for beginners, when you want to get into slide, you've got to learn the technique. Introducing a new tuning all of a sudden becomes a lot more difficult, and it's a whole new thing. So one thing that you want to be aware of is that you can do yourself like any sort of blues in A backing track, anything that, you know, there's hundreds of them around, and then say take the little blues box that you might know in the key of A, 10th fret, 8th fret, 10th fret, 8th fret, and 9th fret on the G string, that little box, and then just muck around, remembering to concentrate on just trying to get that one note at a time thing going on. So rather than trying to think, oh, I've got to do a different tuning, starting in standard tuning is, I think, a really good way of developing the technique of slide guitar. Now, I don't play a whole lot of slide guitar in the open tunings because it tends to sound really bluesy right away. There's a lot of different kind of licks in it that I don't tend to be into doing that blues slide guitar. But if we had a quick look at, say, open G tuning, where we tune the thinner string down to a D, and the fifth string down to a G, okay, normally the sixth, oh, let's do it anyway, the sixth string down to a D as well. Now, ever wondered why Keith Richards only had a 5-string guitar? He was in open G tuning, and this low note becomes a bit redundant, so very often we're not going to be playing that. But the idea now with the open tunings is that if we play just straight across from the 5th string, I'm just going to not play the 6th string, but we've now got ourselves, that would be a C chord. So we've got a chord just by playing a straight line, which of course for slide guitar is a really, really useful thing. Because all of the notes in the chord are all in the same fret, you tend to have nice little licks that are quite easy to play that are all based around one position. So if we're playing up here in a G, the 12th fret, or there are these nice little blues licks there that are kind of based around where the slide would be for playing the chord anyway. And while I think that having a look at open tuning is a really fun thing to do, particularly with slide guitar, I think right at the beginning, if you're just new to slide guitar, maybe staying with regular tuning is a little bit easier because it's less to think about. You can just be thinking about your technique, making sure you're just getting one note at a time, and using scales and groups of notes that you're already familiar with rather than having to learn a whole new set. That said, if you want to get into like proper Delta blues, that kind of proper old school slide guitar thing, then you've got to get into the open tuning, either open G or open D, really what you're going for. Now one last little tip for you, and then I'll leave you to go and experiment on your own for a bit. Vibrato, really important that you realize when we're playing vibrato kind of regularly, we're moving physically up and down. Okay, doing side to side vibrato on electric guitar doesn't do a whole lot. So we're generally pulling the string up and down, but with slide guitar, moving up and down doesn't really do anything, okay? So the thing to think about with slide guitar is trying to base it around a fret. So let's pick this note D here, which is the 7th fret of the 3rd string. We've got all our muting done nice. We're going to play the note, then play the note with the slide, and now see if we can get a bit of nice vibrato either side of the note. Okay, so I'm thinking like moving literally either side, so the center, the fulcrum of the distance I'm traveling, the middle of it is exactly where the fret is. Okay, when we're playing regularly, we tend to, if we're adding vibrato, we're only going up actually. We go from the note up and back again. Because we can't go down, we can't bend it down like that. With the slide you can go both directions, so it gives the kind of vibrato you get with slide a little bit of a different flavour, which I think is actually really nice, and it makes it a little bit more vocal sounding to me, a little bit more like a singer would play. So one last thing that I want to mention as well that's a really, I think, a great exercise for slide guitar. If any of you are learning the major scale and checking out the major scale positions, major scale patterns, using any of the G major backing tracks like the one that you can get on my website, and then practicing your G major scale over it and doing it with slide guitar is a really, really great fun thing to do. Particularly because, excuse me, Because tuning is so important with slide guitar, you really need to be doing it with some kind of backing. Just playing it on by yourself, it's very, very hard to work on your intonation or your in-tuneness. So every time that you're playing slide guitar, I would really recommend that you use some sort of backing. Either it's your own guitar playing on a looper pedal, or you're using a proper backing track, or just playing along with a record that you really like. Anything really, but just to really make sure that what you're playing is in tune, because out of tune slide guitar sounds really rough. Really, it's not a happening thing at all. So getting yourself in tune is probably the most important thing of everything. So I hope that gives you a good starting on slide guitar and that you enjoy it. I really enjoy it. It's a great aspect of playing guitar that can be a lot of fun and really expressive. So that's what I like about it. Take care of yourselves. See you for plenty more lessons and songs very soon. Bye bye.